Thanks. My friends in Sweden and France call me Simon, but I also answer to Simon. What I want to talk about today is how we introduced something called continuous integration into a large organization with many teams. There's three aspects there. The big organization, lots of teams, lots of people, and something called continuous integration. And we'll see as we go through that I avoided using continuous integration, and I'll explain why. So we're going to take a little journey, look at some of the background context that we were working with, what it meant, how we approached that, some of the issues we saw on the way. We have a little bit of shrubbery. We might stop and admire some things on the way. We'll see how that goes. And as usual, I'll say this now before I forget, I'm here for the rest of the day and tomorrow, so this for me is a means for discussion. I am not saying this is exactly how I fixed everything. I'm going to talk about some things that didn't work as well. And I haven't solved all those problems, so if you've got viewpoints on that, I'm really interested to hear that. Okay, let's look at the background then, some of the context that we were working in. I work for Ericsson in Sweden. We work with telecommunications. I'm part of a team that builds IP multimedia systems. And that's a network. It's not one box, it's lots of boxes doing lots of different things. Some of that is different types of servers. And I'm not really going to explain the product. But if you want to ask me about that later, I'm very happy to talk about it. But we had a complex system, a network that we were building up. Lots and lots of different boxes. We want to work on lots of features. We want to put out lots of features to try and capture the market needs. As part of that, we also had many teams. And to me, it's those many teams, lots of people, and the complexity in the architecture that actually generates or creates the complex system. So it's not the product itself, and it's not the people themselves, it's the combination. And it's that's the thing that doesn't stay still. So we need to think about the people side of that, those aspects. And when you have this scenario, because we were finding this difficult to test in a good way, in some way that gave meaning. We had that aspect because of the lots of teams, lots of feature development, complex product. And then that led on to slow feedback. And that slow feedback came partly from the complexity in the system. It was difficult to test. That introduced a delay. And of course, that fed back around. It didn't reduce the complexity of the problem we were trying to work with. And to me, that looks a bit like a vicious circle, or a merry-go-round, or really, I should say, a very unmerry merry-go-round. It was not a happy place to be in. And what I'm trying to do here is try to describe some of the problem. And I've left out quite a lot of elements as well, but some of the main parts there. So once we'd worked out how to do that, we then thought, okay, we want to look at some aspects here. We want to work on visibility. We want to work on feedback into the teams. We want to work on raising awareness. Those are some of the points that we wanted to work on, and inputs into that would help us improve that. We identified some mindset problems. We identified some organizational structural problems. So in the mindset box there, what do we see there? That's my iceberg. It's something we see something on the top, we see some symptoms, but actually that's exactly what they are. They're symptoms. It usually hides a lot of detail. So in this case then, we saw something called broken windows, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. And something very related to that we saw hidden costs. Or did we see hidden costs? We were aware of hidden costs. Now, those hidden costs then, we have, when we're developing software, when we're testing software, we occasionally find problems. We find problems all the time. And we have a certain amount of analysis work that we need to go through for that. We have to understand what that problem is, what it means. And that's an overhead we're always going to have. We're not going to get away from that. But then, remembering the context I'm talking about, I was working with, this was a problem we were trying to distribute to 20 teams, 20 plus teams. If we have a problem that we're not fixing, of course we can get that problem occurring in 20 places. It's going to mean we're going to be doing that analysis, repeating that analysis in 20 different places, potentially. So that's a cost of reanalysis. And that doesn't sound like a good thing. What does that really mean? Yeah, it means we're not doing as much good testing as we might want to do. So we have a cost of reduced testing. And then when you start looking at these things, if you want to talk to a stakeholder or someone who's a budget holder and start saying, well, yeah, we've got this reanalysis going on in all these different teams, that means we're actually doing less effective testing. And so then my sort of open question is this cost efficient? If you frame it like that to a stakeholder, to a budget holder, he might sit up and listen. He might think, yeah, okay, that's not a good way to carry on. Now, connected with this is this idea of broken windows. And this is a theory that was first described, I think, in the early 80s. It was to do with describing social norms and how people behave, specifically in this case towards criminality and criminology. And the idea was that in a neighborhood, if you had a broken window, or you had some graffiti, or you had litter that wasn't treated, that wasn't rectified in some way, what does that do? It actually sends out a signal. You're sending out a signal that this is okay. We'll put up with this. Now, about 10 years ago, Hunt wrote A Pragmatic Programmer, and he took this theory and he applied it to software development. And he said, this appears in lots of different forms. It appears in terms of bugs not getting fixed. We're not saying fix all bugs, but bugs just don't get fixed because they were there already. It crops up in terms of not so well maintainable code. If you've got logging and tracing that is not so good to handle in that, that's a problem. But who wants to fix that? If we're not fixing it, it's sending out a signal that, yeah, we're not so bothered about the maintainability, the fact that you can fault localize easily. So it's sending out a message. Now, in teams, you hear this, or I hear this. I hear this quite commonly. Well, it was broken when I got it. That problem was already there. So in theory, A, we don't have to fix it, or should we really do something about it? Now, to get to that stage, of course, it's taken a certain amount of analysis, a certain amount of effort, a certain amount of work. So we're changing the analysis, what might be effective analysis, into some sort of deflecting attention. It wasn't me. Don't do it, it wasn't me. I have a great T-shirt that demonstrates this. It's taken from the Keep Calm and Carry On, and I have a variant of that, Keep Calm, it wasn't me. And I occasionally wear that when I start hearing these comments. So, is that an efficient way to work? If you frame the problem like that, and you start talking about the problem like that, then people, stakeholders, different budget holders start listening and start realizing that, yeah, that's not great. Okay, so what can we do about that? So what did we do about that? If we go over here and look at some of the situational and organizational mechanics, as I call it, we were dealing with, what did we have there in the organization? Well, we were producing lots of software. We had relatively happy customers, so it wasn't as though everything was wrong. And that was the important point here. We were trying not to reinvent the wheel. We didn't want to start from scratch and say, let's build something up from scratch, because, of course, that's a lot of work. We need to recognize the things that are good in the system already. We had good people, good engineers, we had good software we were producing. It wasn't all quite tying together when we were getting up to 20-plus teams. And so we were trying to work out what is out there already and what can we reuse. And we set up a group to go through the typical prototype, do some evaluation, and build something that when we're happy with that. And the thing that we were building here was a tool, we say it like that, to help with the feedback and the visibility. But as I said, part of the problem was not the tool itself, it was actually in the organization, in the mindset of the people. But let's quickly look at what we did then, what we did build. We wanted to reuse things that we could reuse. That was quite an important point. We had triggers for code building. We would produce new code and then we would have triggers that would automatically go and build a new system. We had triggers for test scripts. So we had lots and lots of test scripts of different types that we could run off, and those scripts would run the tests and capture some results. And all these tests, we had component, unit tests, we had functional tests, we had end-to-end tests and stability tests. And as I said, we were working in a network environment, so the end-to-end test was capturing, it was a small network, and we were changing piece of software in one part of that network, and then doing the client activity on each end. It was similar to an acceptance test, but that was not our purpose with that. So we had a lot of these things already, but they're all spread out in the organization. They weren't collected together and they weren't in some sort of organized way. So we had missing visibility there. And what we did then, we built this triangle. I don't know, it's one of my favorite three-sided shapes. But we took this triangle and it was a visualization method. We said, okay, we want to do something that's common. We want to build the software. When we produce some new software, we want to build the new system. And then we want these 4 parallel tracks to start off. Presuming the code builds, we want to do the component tests, we want the function tests, the end-to-end tests, and the stability type testing. We want those all to set off from the same point. And this was our goal. And we wanted to do this within 4 hours. So from new code being available to all these different, quite broad range types of tests being done. Now, a lot of this is all automated, by the way, I should point out. So in the parlance that we sometimes talk about, these are checks. And that's an important point, because we'll come on to this also, that this is one view of the system. It's not the view of the system. From that, we wanted to produce something, and we wanted to make that visible. And we did that by generating reports that were web-based, would be emails out to the teams that were affected, and we piped that out to TVs. We placed TVs out by coffee corners. We were located in 3 different countries, so we wanted the information going out. And the purpose with that was to actually reflect what was going on, what the status was in different teams, maybe even to show up some patterns of problems. We interleaved the TV displays with Dilbert cartoons. So if people weren't interested in the report, and at least they were looking at the Dilbert. But then they might see the report and then notice something and go, aha, yeah, that's interesting. And how did it look like? We had this web-based archive that we generated, and we tried to display all the results of this information we gathered. And we basically did it in some sort of tabular format. We had, for each team, we had their code version. Every time they produced a new code version, it would get picked up. There'd be some timestamp about when this report was generated, when it had finished. We had different labels, versions for the test code we did. And then, of course, we had these two things. We called it Indicator 1 and Indicator 2. And these would be results of those 5 different items in that triangle: the building, the component testing, the functional testing, end-to-end, and stability test. And we wanted to represent that in color. And color in this sense meant red was, okay, urgent attention needed. You need to look at this. Yellow meant there's some sort of warning. There's something not quite right, but it's not life-threatening. And we had green, which in my mind meant we don't have any evidence to say that this is really bad, which was totally opposite from saying this is really good. One of the things I noticed, though, with this, when you present things in these colors, of course, people interpret colors in different ways. And you get the sort of green bar, coma symptom. Oh yeah, I got another green result. That's good, isn't it? What we were trying to do here was say these are indicators. They're not the whole truth. They're part of the story. And down here we had our mainline integration where all the teams were delivering into, and we had some monitoring going on there. So that was indicator 1. That was these results. Indicator 2 then was a trend. It was a comparison between the current result and the previous result. And here it's really green and red. So red means it deteriorated in some way. Green means it's either the same or better. And that's just a quick way to get a picture of what's going on there. But really, the interesting thing is that when we see green and yellow, that means, okay, I need to be looking into this now. That was the web version. And of course, this was all clickable, so you could go in and get the individual results, whatever it was you wanted, and log files, they were archived. So we were building up a repository, a history there. But we mentioned this indicator 1, indicator 2 thing there. This was one way of getting feedback into the teams. They would be getting emails, notification when some new result was ready. There would be visibility being generated. But we didn't really succeed with the awareness part there. And that was a really tricky problem. So let's look into that. Well, let's look into the indicator thing there. Now, when I listened to Jürgen this morning, I thought he'd read my slides. Because I had this idea of going to a doctor, and you go to a doctor and he might take your pulse. But it's just one measure. It doesn't really say so much. It's not enough to declare fitness. The one corner case, the one case that you can use, of course, is if there is no pulse. And a doctor can say, yeah, it's definitely not fit. And that's the point here. It's one measure. It's as I want to say, it's not an assessment. It's an indicator. It's some information that you can use to try to make an assessment, to try and make a decision about the product. But it's not the assessment itself. And that was something we worked on a lot with teams and trying to reinforce that message a lot to greater and lesser success. Because it's a difficult thing to get past. Oh, but that thing showed me green. That must be okay. So that led me to try and find different analogies about where a measure does not give you the whole truth. And that was probably the best one I've come with so far. But of course, there's lots of other information that you're going to get about the product. Lots of different sources. You might have our daily stand-up meetings, weekly reports if anyone produces them, but of course email, corridor chat, ways to get questions in, ways to say, oh, I'm not sure about that. How can you tell me why we have that problem, why that's not working? That's information about, if you get someone in the team saying that, that's information about A, what they know in the team, maybe they don't know about it, maybe they can't see what team B over there is doing. Aha, we have a visibility problem. It might be that, it might also be that they're not able to investigate it for some reason, so they might need some help. These are all useful bits of information and sources of information that we should be looking for. And of course, we're learning about the system all the time here. We're building up this picture. If I'm sitting in a team developing a feature, whether I'm a tester or coder or some proxy product owner, whatever, we're building up a picture of that we're developing all the time. And it's always a snapshot. This is what we know at this time. And that snapshot, of course, will build up information. You build that up about the software that you're developing. Build it up about the team. How is our team working? You build it up about the organization that you're in. Okay, are our stakeholders supporting us with this? Are they helping us? And of course, you build up some idea about how the end product might look as well. So I said we didn't call this continuous integration. I called it this delivery readiness, the tool, actually, delivery readiness monitor. And the individual results were delivery readiness indicators. Did that so that no one built up any preconceptions with continuous integration. Oh yeah, we've got a continuous integration now. We have a continuous integration tool. Now we do continuous integration. Which of course we don't. The tool does something, but if you don't react to it, if you don't work with the information that you're getting from that, it's not continuous integration, really. So to get past that problem, I said, okay, let's call this delivery readiness. Let's have an idea about where we're going and maybe some sort of idea how far along that road we are, how good or bad. Or you can compare that with the idea of definition of done and are we ready yet? It's that sort of thing. I wanted to get that thinking into the team to understand, where are we? So to recap, we went through a set of prototyping where we tried to understand the problem, and there we understood it both as an architectural problem. We had a complex system we were working with, but that complex system was comprised of a product, features we were putting in there, and people. We had a lot of scripts already a lot of already done work that we were trying to collect and reuse. And then, based on that sort of problem description, we were trying to come up with some sort of strategy to say, yeah, okay, we can fix the tool bit, but how do we fix the people side bit, and how do we get them working in this? And through that, our next stage of evaluation, of course, we tried this out on a couple of teams. We had one team with that were doing the tool development as such, and another team that were live and we were trying this out on. And we were basically shadowing them. We didn't interrupt their work, but we shadowed them with this tool and actually generated this information and sent it to them. And no, we did that with 2 teams. And one team thought it was quite good, and the other was, yeah, okay, why are you sending me all this information? But of course, we were refining that. We were refining the way that we define these colors and the boundaries between them, because there are no fixed boundaries, and we kept moving them to understand what fitted for the system at the time. And then, of course, we started constructing and packaging this. We wanted to put this into a format that was something that would be used by all teams automatically. We wanted to build those radiators, that way of distributing the information, whether it's via TV or the web or email. And we wanted to start radiating. We needed to talk about this. We needed to spread that information. We needed to say, hey, look, we have this. We're giving you this information, but it's not the whole truth. Remember that. It doesn't mean you don't have to do X, Y, Z. We have teams that are already developing software. They're coding and testing that. We're giving additional information. And that's the key. But of course, we want the people to work with that information. So let's look at some of the lessons or problems we hit along the way. Big organizations, lots of teams, there come problems attached with us. And a common one that I noticed was that no matter how good your message, it gets diluted as it goes out into the organization. And sometimes the message gets lost, sometimes it gets changed. We were located in 3 physical sites in 3 different countries. And there was a cultural aspect as well, which was interesting. I didn't understand that might happen before, but I noticed that happening. So a message would get translated. So I might say, it might be good if you do this, and in one country that got translated as do this, which is totally not the point. So messages change, and they lose their meaning. So to counteract that, of course, we then discover we need to repeat some of the message. We need to sit down with individuals. We need to understand which bits of those messages worked and which didn't. Awareness. I said at the beginning that one of the ambitions we had was to create more awareness in the team about the code they were developing and the impact it might have on the end product or the end system. We had this broken Windows issue, if we say it like that. All the hidden cost of rework and not working in the first place. And it's more, how do we react to that? Sometimes we've got some teams reacted very, very well to it. And the point with this was that if I get a red flag here or a yellow flag here, it's not just that I go and do something to fix that test that failed. It's more that that's point in a direction where I should go and explore and investigate in that part of the system. Some teams did that without any more encouragement. They saw that as a signal. There's a problem over there. Let's go and investigate. Others just went and did enough to fix that problem and didn't investigate more. So the actual reaction to the information that we're getting was actually quite mixed. And that's something we discovered. And so the way we partly fixed that was more by some more individual coaching. And saying, well, yeah, if we did get that yellow result, how could we, just by fixing that one test that flagged that up, or whatever it was, is there anything else we might have missed? And you start after discussing it in that way. And then people realize, yeah, there is something. Yeah, I should go check that. Indicators. We were very keen to say this is not an assessment. This is not enough to say we can deliver. It's a flag along the road, along the journey. It's some information. And delivery readiness, this idea about, well, how do I know when I'm done? How do I know when these features are working as we think they should be? And of course that pushes a whole lot of questions back towards the beginning, when the team is first starting, which is exactly what we wanted to do. We wanted those questions to be cropping up at the beginning, not from a typical traditional waterfall test view that we do some testing over there and then that tells us when we're ready. We wanted to get those questions back into the beginning of the cycle. And we want to get that thinking going. And that worked and didn't work. That's a real difficult problem. We looked at this and we realized, well, there are some organizational barriers here. Because the team, no matter how much of this we get into the team, if the team is being forced to work in a certain way and to say we need to meet this delivery commitment, then a lot of these ideas go out of the window. So we noticed organizational problems there as well. And that's something we're still working on. We haven't completely solved that. So, feedback. We were getting feedback quicker into the teams. It was coming within a few hours. And that was from a very wide span of testing or checking. It was a lot of information that was coming in there. But of course we were saying these are indicators. We tried to overcome some of the sticking points. The idea with the cost of reanalysis, the cost to reduce testing. We tried to overcome some of that by flagging that up. When you see that occurring in one team, it's one thing. When you see it occurring in 20 teams, it's a pattern. And that's something that you can point at, and then you can react on that. But we still have work to do on that, I think. We were very conscious about saying that the tool is not the solution. Just as we were saying that the complex system is partly made up by the people and the teams, the actual work we're going to produce is actually produced by the people and the teams. So no matter how good a tool and automated test you might have, we still need to react on that information and use that information. And we were trying to build up awareness. We've taken some steps. I don't think we're there. I don't think we're halfway really there in some ways. As I mentioned, some of that I think is organizational, and that is a very big oil tanker to steer. You know, if you start turning an oil tanker, it takes a very long time for it to turn around. But we're working on that. We're trying to make some steps there. But now some of the teams are very much aware of how their changes might affect the end product, because they're getting that information in all the time. And if you see this pattern and of course you can work out different, get different assessments from how those teams react. If teams are producing red, green, red, green, red, green results, it might be a symptom of one problem, whether they're working on code that is being refactored and needs a lot of rework on it. Or it could be that maybe the team needs some help. So that visibility also helps the rest of the organization. And whether it's competence managers or whoever it is that deals with that, they can actually be a warning sign to them. Maybe we need to see if the team needs help. And I think that is about the journey. I hope I left some time for questions. Oh, yeah, I should say, a lot of the work and ideas I've been discussing here, these are all the references. I'm not going to go through them, but I'm very happy to talk about them today, tomorrow, whenever. And I can tell you, probably point of pages in these books about which is useful and what I've used. So I'm going to try and leave some time for questions, and I'll stop there. Thank you.
Yes, we have time for questions. And if you don't mind to miss lunch, you will have more time.
Yeah.
Okay. So, any questions?
So you talked about awareness, but I wasn't sure of what were all the different ways you built awareness versus just showing indicators. Just by the gauging, by looking for the reactions and then reacting to the reactions, like, oh, people must need some coaching because they're not taking appropriate steps based on the results and the indicators they're seeing?
Okay, no, I didn't mean that about the awareness. What I meant with building awareness was, okay, understanding the code we're building and the products that we're developing and how we build that picture into how that will fit into the end picture. Yeah, that example I gave there could be a way of also using that from other parts of the organization, because we wanted to make that work visible to all as well. So it wasn't just awareness within one team, it was awareness in the whole product line, so to say. Yeah. But that's actually an area we haven't, I don't think we've fixed. It's a very, very complex area as well. Yeah. There's a lot of work to do there. And as I say, I think I've seen some organizational barriers. So it's the complexity in the system is partly built up from the architecture we're working with, some of the mindset that sits in the organizations, the people and team as well. But of course, there are also a lot of hidden ones. Yeah. So it's much more complex.
Okay, anyone after the award winner? Okay.
I don't know whether your CI system or delivery readiness indicator system involves actual hardware involved in the test. I mean, we found in our organization that it really benefited installing some of the hardware that the CI system was using in the different sites so that people could see the CI system there, even though the test could quite well run anywhere in the other sites, but they had some local ownership, and then actually also employ people in the different sites, making them part of a global CI team, so they felt much more involved, so it didn't seem to come from somewhere else. But
yeah, there was actually quite a lot of hardware behind this. We had one that was working with the job server that was capturing all this new build there. We distributed work. We have a hub environment, which means that I think we have about 200 machines that everyone is using, and we monitor the usage on them. So when there's low usage on one, we send work out there, and that's how we distribute the testing. But there are two pieces of real hardware, and there are big bottlenecks. The stability runs and the end-to-end tests, because there we are using a real smaller network. And those are the bottlenecks, and that's one of the areas we're trying to work on now, about how to filter the jobs into that in a more efficient way. Yeah. But yeah, we have a lot of hardware, and I understand the point, but it's not immediately visible, yeah, because we're actually reusing machines that people use their daily work for. So when we see a dip in usage, whether it's in the evening or what, then we utilize that machine. Yeah. But it's not visible in that way. Yeah. But it could be, yeah, it's an interesting point. It could be useful to try that. Yeah.
Okay, one more question.
Just remember to fill your feedback on that small book, and that's your entrance to the lucky door. So thanks everybody, and thanks Simon.
Thank you.